Hey everybody, Jamie Starr here for the New World News Network. I know in the past I've mentioned the idea of wanting to do more cultural commentary, so I figured doing some on the show Moon Knight, the Disney Plus Marvel show, would be a good place to start because honestly, this show to me seems like the living embodiment of an ESG score. And by that I mean, ESG is this whole environmental social governance thing that these companies do for to qualify for loans and such. And a common misconception among people, I mean, I've argued about it with people in regards to professional wrestling, where they hear WWE is $1 billion company traded at $1 billion, and it's like, okay, that's their stock evaluation. um that's not liquid assets. WWE actually operates in with, was it like $608 million in debt. So they're a $1 billion company, but more than half of that, they owe more than half of that in debt. So it's not as cut and dry as people think. Disney's not doing as well as people think. They're not as valuable. They have boatloads of debt. And so this is why you see this push into diversity, representation, and all that stuff. And you know, people the the expectations for Moon Knight, everyone's like, "Oh, is this going to be like a horror movie? Is it going to be like Netflix's Daredevil, which was very gritty and grounded?" And I mean, Netflix's Daredevil was a great show, but Moon Knight is essentially about dissociative identity disorder and Egypt. Very little is even about Moon Knight. I mean, as far as heroes go in the story, one could argue Layla, who is this newly concocted Egyptian love interest character, she's far more of a hero and a badass than Mark Spector or whoever the name is. And the thing the MCU does very well, I will say, is they understand how little marketing they have to do and how they can essentially just Easter egg and tease the YouTube community into creating hours of, oh my god, the other person in the sarcophagus, is it a third personality? Is it a this? Is it a Mephisto? Is it a that? And like, they just are able to get these people up in a tizzy to then just amplify the buzz and excitement about the what could happen. And the part that's really disappointing to me is there is such a minimal concern for substance at this point and such a over focus on this vague interconnectivity thing. Now, with Morbius, which Sony just put out, before the movie was even out, you had people saying, they lied to us, there's no Spider Man in it. I was never under the impression that Spider Man was in it. And I don't think they ever gave, besides just having a poster of him in the background, which is again just a reference, this whole concept that Spider Man came into the movie was due to YouTubers seeing a breadcrumb and then hearing about reshoots and then fantasy, like, what would be the movie equivalent of fantasy booking, basically. That's what they were doing. They were fantasizing that this was going to be tied into and it's going to be part of the bigger, and even the whole Doctor Strange thing. I see so much more concern for the cameos and who could show up rather than the story itself. Like, I mean, you also have the ending of Loki where the multiverse falls apart, but that doesn't affect Doctor Strange. Like, the Russo brothers have basically come out and said that Marvel doesn't have a plan. And the more they're doing, the more it seems haphazard. Where, like, it seems going into this whole multiverse angle that they've really just decided, well, if enough of the shows reference it and fuck it up, then somehow it will all link together and we won't have to worry about overlapping connections. It'll just be vague enough that the YouTubers will tie it all together. So anyway, that's a general criticism. Back to Moon Knight specifically, though. Like, the whole first episode, you're basically just spending watching this Oscar Isaac, who I really enjoy as an actor. I thought he was good in Dune. But playing this Cockney British guy just sort of putzing around the whole time. Then you have the other persona, Mark Spector, and I don't know. There's just something about it where it didn't really seem like like there was nothing to really latch onto. Like, I'm sorry, I worked in a mental health. All right, sorry about that. We're gonna have these two cut together because the techie boyfriend's super concerned about overcharging his battery, so then when the screen blacks out and I appear frozen, I don't know what's working or not. So anyway, you basically have him like just putzing around, being very confused. It's again laying the groundwork for these multiple identities, and then you get maybe 2 seconds of the suit. Maybe that's even the second episode. I don't know. The whole thing is just very obnoxious. And it really just feels like they're just hiding behind these layers. And the problem is they're, again, with this internet community sort of theory crafting all the time, you can get away with having these shoddy plot holes that people then think are intentional. Like, everyone, because they know the comics, is theorizing, oh, there's a third personality. That's why there's stuff going on that, this one doesn't know or that one doesn't know. And my faith that a lot of that's even going to be resolved or addressed during the last episode is next to none. It might just be teased at the end, but you have this director who is like complaining that Wonder Woman didn't properly represent Egypt or Egyptian mythology. And I've already heard people point out the attributes they're giving to Khonshu and Emmett are not correct. They're actually go to other people. So their attempt to actually just be more overt with the Egyptian angle is in fact misrepresenting it. It's really just a backdrop for all of this shit. And again, there's nothing comic booky. I mean, even the last episode with this whole, oh, my childhood trauma, this and that, like there's so little superhero, and I feel like I'm just watching a movie or a TV show about a mentally ill man. Like, there's been so little focus on anything comic booky and just mental illness shit, and then being like, oh, we need to make sure we handle it right and this and that. And I just ask myself, who was this made for? And then I'm like, oh, it's made for their ESG score, so they can be like, well, here's representation, and we talked about mental illness and we did this and that. And it's like, yeah, but you're doing nothing to entertain a comic book fan. Like, I'm personally not familiar with Moon Knight. I like the look of him. I like everything I heard was coming. And then when I'm getting it, I'm like, this is awful. I have no interest in this guy. This is, ugh. Like, I'm sorry, I worked in a mental health field. I know what this shit looks like up close and in person. And they're making this all seem very cutesy. Like, as if it's just like some little game you can play to figure it all out and stuff like that. And here's the other thing that is really odd that I picked up on. So, you have on Twitter this trend of people and their alts. People, claiming, oh, I have 36 people living in my head and let me name them all off. And it's sort of become very trendy to say you have multiple personalities. I mean, yeah, why not? Because we already think you can be gender fluid, so why not be personality fluid as well? So you have that going on. At the same time, Marvel puts out this thing. Well, on the other hand, they're doing this Doctor Strange movie, which is the Multiverse of Madness. And I can't help but think there's a correlation between that and, say, the metaverse, where, you see Doctor Strange in these trailers going through, oh, well, here's a universe with dinosaurs, and here's one where he's animated, and yeah, that's what the metaverse is going to be. It's going to be pop on your headset, and then you're in this universe, and pop on your headset, and then you're in that universe. And it really brings me back to the idea. One of the things people don't realize about Disney is that there are certain things like when people were very concerned with the RFID and sort of biometric tracking tools, and the idea of putting a microchip in yourself to walk into a place and all of that stuff gets beta tested at Disney. And I know there's been an uproar about, Disney and grooming, and even today, an actress from the original Doctor Strange is being accused of, like, fucking a child. But there are Disney and DARPA connections, like the same way we look at Facebook and Twitter and all of these social media sites as being like proxy government info, intel gathering areas. Disney and their theme parks needs to be looked at in a very similar light, because there are lots of things that get beta tested in Disney because its own private little area, again with like RFID trackers and stuff like that. Lots of things get beta tested at Disney World and then go out to the wider public. So I'd be very interested in finding out what Disney's military contracts are like, similar to Facebook and all that. But this Moon Knight shit is like hot garbage. Like I can't, and part of me questioned, like, should I wait until the last episode to do this video? And then I'm like, there's nothing that's going to be in this last episode that's going to salvage anything. So I just figured I would throw out my theory and not be too long with this, that I really feel like this is a embodiment of an ESG score, where it's just box checking. And it's like, it's box checking, and then Moon Knight is just sort of the cloak that the show is wearing in order to make Disney eligible for loans. And that's basically it. So if you like the channel, subscribe to the channel. If you want some music that's not fucking corporate controlled and all that shit, check out my website, thumpermusic.us, and have a good one, everyone.